Hi, everyone. Welcome to this video. Glad that you're here. Glad that you're watching this. These are some of my most exciting YouTube videos to record is when I get to invite people in and talk about really cool stuff. And that's exactly what we're doing today. So I want to welcome my guest, Amanda Morin, and I'm going to let you guys say a little bit about yourselves. And Emily Kircher-Morris. Um, we are going to be talking about a book that you all wrote, which is, I think, a very needed, very important book. But first, if you want to just kind of introduce yourself briefly, tell us something about you, what you do. For the watchers here, that would be great.
Sure. Emily, you wanna kick us off with this?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm Emily, and I am a licensed professional counselor. But what led me to being where I am today with all of this is I started my career in education, and I actually have a master's in education with certification in gifted ed, where I began working a lot with twice exceptional kids. And so I have a second master's in counseling, which is what led me to work both as a school counselor and then to move into my private practice where I support neurodivergent kids, twice exceptional, not twice exceptional, autistic, ADHD, and really am passionate about that. I'm also the host of the Neurodiversity podcast and have written a couple of different books, really focused on how we support neurodivergent young people in all of the different settings, home, school, clinic, therapy
Yes,
setting.
Mhm.
that's so
Um,
awesome. Yeah,
I'm Amanda Morin. I'm a certified teacher and behavioral specialist. So I'm actually have an expertise in both special education and early childhood intervention. And what brought me to this work is that I love the special education field and I love working with neurodivergent students in particular. I do some one-on work with families, some one-on-one work with families and students, and also have written a number of books around the special education, empathy, adulting kind of space to see how do we help our neurodivergent students really thrive in the settings that they're in, and have been delighted to actually work with Emily on this project too. Yeah.
that's great. And thank you guys for sharing. And we're talking, of course, about Neurodiversity Affirming Schools. That's the title of the book. Do either of you have your book with you?
Amanda, yours is
No.
No.
probably closer than
I was
mine is.
gonna
Mine's
say mine is a
Like,
upstairs.
little far.
because
It's like over there.
okay, because I actually have a copy of this book, but I don't have it with me either. So I'm like, this
Between
is
the
the
three of
great
us,
irony of us talking about this, right?
it
But
fits. It fits.
it
This
totally
seems
fits,
right.
right?
Neurodivergent minds at
Um,
work right there.
Neurodiversity Affirming Schools is the
Yeah.
correct title, right? And
hmm
that's, of course, what the book is about. But I will put up a link to the book title where it can be found to you all's websites if you have that. I know you do, Emily.
hmm
So, everybody watching will have that information. Would you guys just like to start by explaining what the book goes into and what it covers and what readers would find if they pick up this book?
Sure. And I think the subtitle of the book actually helps with that too. It's transforming practices so all students feel accepted and supported. And that's sort of the key about this book is we're really writing about how do you change practices in all classrooms so that all the minds in those classrooms have the support they need to really thrive and flourish and be supported for who they are and not for the system that they're in, right? And I think
Right.
that's the simplest way I would explain this book is that we're really hoping to change systems and classrooms to give people ways to look at their students and really make sure that they are looking at the students' strengths, their needs, supporting them, and realizing, frankly, that there are simple little changes that can make really big changes in how a student shows up in the classroom.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think, I mentioned that I kind of come from the gifted education background and from the counseling side of things. Amanda comes from that special ed and that early childhood side of things. But really, what we realize is so often we focus on supporting neurodivergent kids in an individual setting. so my first book is Teaching Twice Exceptional Learners. And so that was really adopted a lot by a lot of gifted ed teachers, but not by the special education teachers who also are supporting those same students. And so often, especially in the general education classroom, these are kids who historically, teachers have thought, well, that's not my problem. They go to this other room for that particular support or that particular need. But we know that neurodivergent kids really are in all of our classroom environments, all of our schools. So this book was really hoping to create an awareness about the systemic changes that we need, from the administration to the general education classrooms to the special ed to the gifted ed to the SLPs and OTs, like everybody who's working in this school. How do we support neurodivergent kids? Also recognizing that there are a lot of neurodivergent kids out there who maybe don't have a label but still need some supports, and recognizing that the supports we put in place for neurodivergent kids are really good for all kids.
That is so good, what you both said. It's a good overview of the book. One of the things that I really appreciate about it is that I feel like it's so thorough. Like you were both mentioning, it covers kind of everything, right? It covers the administration, the greater system, the individual teacher. Like you're looking at all these components to really make the school experience, the education experience successful for the neurodivergent client or child student. And I think what's so important about this, we were talking before we started the recording, I get asked this question all the time. I'm going and doing trainings on AutPlay, mainly to mental health professionals, and even mental health professionals who are not necessarily even in the school setting are bringing up, how do you help our clients in school settings? Because people are recognizing how huge of a need this is. And if someone doesn't recognize that it's a huge need, it is a huge need. We'll just clear that up for them. I mean, it's probably one of the biggest environments that kids are walking into on a daily basis. And no offense at all to the education system, but it's not really designed for most neurodivergent kids. So that creates all this possibility of dysregulation, troubles with getting through the day, focusing on learning, just all the pieces can be kind of bombarding and not really a great fit for neurodivergent kids. So, can you share a little bit about that piece of it? Like when you wrote this book and you put this together, whose hands do you want this to get in, and how can it be empowering and helpful for those people?
Well, I think Emily said it really well when she said it's for everybody, right? And I think that that's the important component of this. Is we really thought hard about it when we were writing this book. Did we want to write, and for lack of a better term, another book that was for teachers only, right? And I think there are a lot of books out there that are for teachers from the bottom up. And we really wanted to write a book that could be systems level and classroom level, right? Because we wanted to make sure that anybody who was working with students, and the fact is, if you're working with students, you're probably working with neurodivergent students, whether you know it or not. And I think that's
Yeah.
key to note and I think a lot of people are aware of that. But if you're not, I just want to say it out loud. There are neurodivergent students in your classroom and you may not know
Yes.
it. For us, it was really important to think about the fact that teachers have some control over their own classrooms, right? OTs, related service providers, they have some control over what happens in their environments. But really, in order to make big change, it's systemic. It comes from administrators, it comes from school boards, it comes from parent support as well. So the book really is designed to meet the needs of wherever you are in that system, so that everybody can work together to like lift up this idea of how do we make sure that we are supporting not only the neurodivergent students and the students around them, but also the educators who really are craving this information and hoping that they can make a difference, so that there are people around them who are saying, yeah, that's great. Let's do this. Let's make changes.
Yeah, I like that. It makes me think, just bringing this home a little bit. I hated school. I hated
Same.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And, I was a definitely neurodivergent child who did have like some strong cognitive savvy about me. So I learned pretty quickly all the things I could do that would get me sent home from school because all I could think about was getting out of this environment. I
Yes.
couldn't
Yeah.
I couldn't think about reading a book or doing a math worksheet or going and joining some gym assembly. I wanted to get out of this environment. And I always try to explain to people when I'm talking, it wasn't the philosophy of school that I hated. I didn't
Mhm.
hate the idea of a teacher. I didn't hate the idea of a classroom. I didn't hate the idea of learning a subject. That was all fine for me. I would have been happy with all those things. It was the environment I hated. It
Mhm.
bombarded my system. And so it was something that, of course, as a kid, my response is don't go to this place that's so distressing. Get out of it as much as you can. And this was my main focus. That was my education is probably if I wanted to go down the path of being a criminal, that was my education. I was learning how to lie. I was learning
Yeah.
how to deceive because I just needed to survive, and I felt
Mhm.
like I'm not going to make it through the day tomorrow. And
Mhm.
so are there pieces of your book that kind of go into this neurodivergent experience of school?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's so interesting that you share that. I think Amanda and I both really relate to that. I know for me, one of the things that I did when I was growing up, I just told Amanda this recently. I know it was one of the stories that had never come up, but I used to ask to go to the nurse when I was first grade, second grade, and I would hold my breath on the way to the nurse, hoping that by the time I got to the nurse's office, my temperature would be high enough, thinking that that would somehow raise my temperature if I didn't breathe and kept my mouth closed
Yes.
just so I could go home because it was so
Yes.
distressing. And so the two chapters that come to mind immediately for me that really address this specifically, we have one chapter specifically on neurodiversity affirming communication,
Mhm.
and we have another one about moving beyond like understanding behaviors through this lens of compliance and
Yeah.
really trying to get to the bottom of it. So, I was diagnosed as ADHD as a kid when I was in fifth grade, which was really unusual at that time for women to, at that age, at that time to be diagnosed with that. But the only strategy that was used to quote unquote help me was disciplinary, staying in from
Mm.
recess, getting my name on the board, being in trouble, feeling
Right.
ashamed. And those are really things that shaped me and really influenced lifelong what, how I see myself, how I see other people, how I feel about my ability to be successful in environments. And there are so many kids who are in that same boat. So when we shift the way that we communicate to and about neurodivergent learners, and when we shift the way that we interpret quote unquote behaviors and adjust our expectations for what's appropriate to understand what a student is experiencing, those are two huge changes. Again, like Amanda mentioned, that you can use in the general education classroom. Teachers are that is practical as far as how you can support those kids in any classroom environment, but also from that systemic side of things, what does the school need to do to create an environment that is welcoming, that offers understanding, and also creates a culture not only among the staff and the faculty, but also among the students, where neurodivergent students feel that they're allowed to be their authentic selves.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, and I definitely relate. You were talking about gym and things like that. And I was thinking, I used to hide in bathrooms during assemblies. Like, I just had this flashback to pep rallies and went, oh my gosh,
Yes.
totally relate to that. I didn't actually have a label or an identification in school because I'm just that much older that I wasn't in that cohort where it was recognized, right? And that stuff was really hard for me. And it wasn't school. It wasn't, I loved learning. I still love learning. I didn't love being at school, right? Because that was so much for my system. It was too much. It was too overwhelming. One of the chapters that I actually would add on to what Emily said is we have a whole chapter on like looking at the sensory environment and the
Mm.
sensory
Mm,
experience of students.
Yeah.
And for me, that was very fulfilling to work on because I was like, aha, this is what I would have needed. This is what the kids I know need. This is what my own kids need, right? To be able to say, like, there are things that you don't see that are really affecting the experience of students. And you just have to believe that that is affecting the experience of students. You don't have to see it, you don't have to experience it yourself, but to be able to say, like, there's so much visual clutter, there's so much buzzing, there's so much, like, all of these things that make it hard for students to show up. Emily, yeah, yeah,
Oh, I was just going to add, and those students may not realize that's what's distressing them.
100, yeah.
Right.
They may not have the language to express that specifically and be able to advocate for themselves. And so it is our responsibility as educators to be the ones who are on the lookout for those things, who are being intentional about those environments. And again, trying to interpret when a student is dysregulated, really trying to get beneath the surface to see what that dysregulation is all about so we can support that need or build that skill, as opposed to trying to tell them to, power through or, knock it off, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Right. That's so huge. It's just this understanding that there is something real happening here, and you want to learn about, what that is, who this child is, instead of, like you said, jumping to these unhelpful sort of judgments. This child is just being difficult, they're a behavior problem, they're whatever, which just distracts us from then getting to whatever we could really be getting to that might be helping them. I laughed when you said the thermometer thing, because I had thermometer tricks, because we had the, glass
The
thermometer you
light
could
bulb,
stick in
the
your
light
tongue.
bulb trick. Yeah.
Listen, I wanted to say that the light bulb worked. It did heat up that thermometer. You had to not get it so hot it burned your mouth. But if you just get it just right, you could get a temperature. And I did that at home. That was an at-home trick to get out of going to school. At school, my go-to is I realized that I discovered there's a policy that if you throw up, you get sent home. And so I would just go to the nurse's office and I would just say I threw up. And, after a while, they started to catch on, but it worked a lot. And I'm like, yay, this is like, it's so funny because there was no like opposition or defiant energy in that at all. I
Right.
clearly remember I just felt like I was on survival mode, lying to make that up to get out of there. Like I had no other option.
I
And I
was,
just, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was working with a student the other day, 8-year-old, like really savvy 8-year-old, right? Who had been sent home from school that day. And the reason that child had been sent home is he flipped over papers, he flipped over tables and things like that. And I said to him, hey, what's going on? And he was like, it was just too hard to be at school today. And I knew that if I flipped stuff over, they'd send me home. And I was like, whoa, well done. I mean, it wasn't well
Yeah.
done that he did it, but it was well done that he reasoned that through. It was too hard for him. And he was able to say that to me. Um, I wish he wasn't in an environment where he felt the need to do that, but that was a really self-aware thing for this 8-year-old to be
Sure.
able to say to me. And then he was like, and I made sure nobody got hurt, which I was like, that's really sweet. And also, let's figure out how we can make
And
it easier.
yet,
And
Yes.
also,
Right.
right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so important. And I know that you all, are having opportunities to go out and talk about this. And I know, Emily, I know that you go speak at schools and other groups. Man, I'm probably sure you do too. Give us some info here on just the kind of resources you provide and where people can get in touch with you.
Sure.
So yeah, the best website to find all of our stuff is neurodiversityaffirmingschools.com. That has information about the book. Amanda and I actually also released a limited series podcast that aligns with the book. So even if you don't have the book, but you're curious about the topics we cover, we basically do one episode per chapter. So you can listen to that whether or not you have the book. So that you can find there. Or if you want to search, you can look on any of your podcast platforms for Creating Neurodiversity Affirming Schools is the name of that podcast.
Great.
We also have on there information about the courses that we have and speaking events, all of those different things that we do. Did I miss anything, Amanda?
I don't think so. I mean, you can find us on most of the social media platforms as well. I say most of. Yeah, most of this. Whether or not I actually use them on a regular basis is iffy. It depends on the day,
Mhm.
but I'm there. You can find me, and I know Emily is there too. But we do, we do a lot of work with educators. And one of the things that I would just say has been really fascinating to me is how many educators are seeing themselves in this book. And they're
Mhm.
saying to us, like, ooh, now I understand myself better. There are things I can do to make the environment easier for me. And I'm loving hearing that. Like, that's been an extraordinary thing I didn't expect to see happen when this came out.
That's great. Well, thank you guys for coming on here, sharing about your book. Thanks for writing this book, because this is something we really do need more information about. So this is a great tool to get into the hands of everyone. Parents who are sending kids to school, obviously everybody who works in the school system, but also just even mental health professionals who are working with kids who are going to school, because those kids bring those issues into our therapy sessions, right? And parents ask us for ideas. So it really is everyone. So thanks for
Yeah.
writing this, putting it together, and coming on here. I really appreciate it. Any final words or thoughts from either of
No,
you?
no.
Okay,
Just
then
thank you. Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks for
thank you.
hosting us and thanks for, all of the work that you do
You're
as
doing.
well. And
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah.
well, I appreciate you being here. So make sure you go to the website and check out this book. I think you are really going to be happy that you did and that you have it as a resource. And thanks for watching the AutPlay YouTube channel videos. Come back, watch more, like and subscribe, all those things. And we'll see you next time. Bye.